Hi, my name is Brianna Sadler and my pronouns are she, her. I'm the MakerLab coordinator at 𝘐𝘩𝘦 Gallery, which is located on the traditional and unceded territory of the 𝘐𝘤𝘦 𝘛𝘪𝘱. For this episode of Maker Musings, I had the pleasure to talk with Colton Hash on his series Carbon Forest. Carbon Forest is a digital art series in the exhibition Tip of the Iceberg, currently on display at 𝘐𝘩𝘦 Gallery until April 4th, 2021, and it showcases the work of 11 BC artists exploring climate change from different perspectives. I hope you enjoy our talk. So, hi Colton, welcome. Before we begin, would you mind stating your pronouns and where you live?
My name is Colton Hash. I use he, him pronouns, and I live on Lekwungen territories in Langford.
So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
I'm currently an MFA candidate at the University of Victoria in visual arts. I am a multidisciplinary, project-oriented person working with a lot of different mediums and also moving through like various ways of knowing. And I'm interested in trying to tie all of this together to try to promote just more like nuanced, more complex understandings of the world and the issues we're facing. I mean, it's pretty clear that, for the complex problems we face, that just like science and logic and this current dominant modes of like working are not like enough. And I definitely think art has a place to kind of reassert, intuition, emotional understanding, spirituality. All of these things are part of solutions and are part of to understand the world in the first place. But even just for like my own personal process of understanding, just being able to work with art in different ways helps me have a better understanding, and then being able to share that, hopefully some of that kind of translates.
You have a very interesting background, which includes education in computer science, environmental studies, and visual art. Can you tell us how you decided on those fields of study and why it was so important for you?
I was really fortunate to have had gone to a high school where I was able to take computer science and also had a really strong art program. I also was involved in like the science club and various like science competitions at school. So that provided me a foundation. Going into university, their University of Victoria had a combined program between computer science and visual arts. And later I added environmental studies as a minor. Moving between these fields is like constantly stimulating interest in different realms. When I was in environmental studies classes, I'd be thinking about computer science. When I was in art classes, I'd be thinking about environmental studies. And all my projects I tried to take as an opportunity to combine my interests in these different areas. So having this interdisciplinary background has just been like extremely important for my work. I work between like technical computer programming development, like I'm a software engineer as part of what I'm doing. I'm an artist working intuitively. I'm also interested in translating scientific issues in modes of like science education, but also activism. So all of these fields like feel really distinct, and sometimes I'm like separating these and doing these in different modes. But what I'm really trying to strive for in my art practice is like working between all of these and not having to separate visual art over here, technology development over here, like science communication over here, but trying to tie them coherently together and doing something that's maybe not like totally perfectly conceptual art fitting within the white gallery space. But trying to do something that is more expansive and more accessible to more people.
So one of the conversations we had prior to this, we talked about your background within the forestry industry, particularly with regards to being a tree planter. So how has this experience actually influenced your piece or your series?
So I started tree planting in 2011, almost 10 years ago, and I've tree planted for about 7 years. And the very first day tree planting, we were planting trees on a young plantation that had burned in a fire near Mount Medina, south of Houston, BC. And so, yeah, this fire basically completely wiped out this block. There was absolutely nothing left, like not even any logs or anything. So it was like the easiest land to plant trees on. But right from the start, I had this like question in my head: is what is the relationship of wildfire and clear-cut logging and like dense monocrop or two species tree plantations? So that's kind of stuck in my head over the past 10 years. And then in 2018, there were these wildfires west of Prince George, some of the largest wildfires in BC's history. There was this cluster of three that are the three fires that I'm showing in my series, Carbon Forest. All these fires depict areas that I've planted trees in. But the Nadina fire, like basically burned the first trees I ever planted. So some of these old like cut blocks that got burned once, had 10 years of regrowth, then got burned again. That is like a lot of loss of soil and a lot of loss of like structure. So those kind of questions are the things that I've been thinking about wanting to work on carbon forest. Yeah, and I actually served as an emergency firefighter on the end of the Verdun fire. At one point, we went to our old tree planting camp that we had been just months before, and there were just like, it was on fire. There was just like little fires burning where we were hanging out and like partying just a few months before. The forest was just like these small little creeping fires burning bushes and burning through the moss, which I find actually like really beautiful. I mean, I really love fire and appreciate fire as a process of like ecological adaptation. Mm-hmm. And I'm really interested in working with fire as a conceptual like topic because it is so incredibly rich. Like it is so terrifying, so emotionally unnerving, and at the same time is such an important part of like forest ecosystems. There is data in this piece that shows the amount of like dead trees remaining from the pine beetle epidemic. And I know that this area is where things kind of spread, and that when the pine beetle epidemic swept through the Rocky Mountains, I was still like in high school and basically experienced that as a front line of climate change. And that's really what like kind of woke me up when I was pretty young and got me interested in a lot of these questions. And of course, yeah, tree planting in this area, we're replanting trees that were harvested post pine beetle epidemic. And that's like still kind of happening.
Mm. So in the year series Carbon Forest, which is currently on display here at Two Rivers Gallery in the exhibition Tip of the Iceberg, can you describe this piece and what people would actually expect when they come in to visit the exhibition?
Yeah, so primarily Carbon Forest is a visualization of wildfire data. This is combining both data that's recorded by satellites that NASA operates, as well as data that was like taken from an aerial survey from the BC government. Mm-hmm. So this shows a recreation of how this fire spread and shows a like representative view of the conditions in which it spread. Mm-hmm. Integrated to create this virtual landscape is various GIS data sources, everything from roads, forest composition to like locations and age of cut blocks. When viewers approach the screen, their presence is picked up by this motion sensor camera, which acts to create a digital shadow in the installation where they reveal some of the underlying data of like the infrastructure that shapes the forest. So when you step in front of the screen, you see this image of yourself, and in the shadow of your image is the roads and cut blocks, as well as a gestural visualization of carbon dioxide emitted from the landscape. And so the carbon dioxide is coming from anywhere we're burning fossil fuels, agriculture areas, but it's also coming from fresh cut or freshly logged cut blocks as the soil is exhaling carbon. And of course, it's coming primarily from like wildfires when they burn. The data for the carbon, or the data driving like the carbon visualization is not scientifically based like at all. As an artist, I feel like I have, space to work and kind of play with various data. And the thing that I'm mostly interested in is showing general relationships, not exactly showing like precisely what is being emitted from where. because that data just doesn't exist. Like we don't have the technology to show a picture of like carbon around the earth. And we definitely don't have data that's at a high resolution showing like precisely how much is coming from small areas. So this is where a project like Carbon Forest, taking a more artistic approach, can kind of interpolate some of these basic concepts and visualize this at a scale that like science can't reproduce at this point.
Now, you mentioned briefly about the motion sensor that is incorporated within this piece. How important was that to have a motion sensor, and what significance does it actually play within the piece?
So this motion sensor is basically like reflecting the presence of the viewer into the work, and is operating in this way that's allowing like this other way of seeing and understanding the landscape. Like this work can exist on its own as just, you know, a totally representative visualization of just the process of these fires spreading. But with this added element, there's this depth of the viewer kind of choosing what they see, but also seeing themselves in this landscape. And there's something for me of seeing this digital shadow where the roads and cut blocks and like carbon being exhaled kind of like reflects our organs. That feels like a really good connection to me, and seeing like our patterns of infrastructure development as like veins and organs in our body. Is there like there's something there, and I'm still like working that out, but it takes it beyond just this like conceptual view of a phenomenon in the landscape and makes it more personal.
Yeah, I mean, I am a strong believer of art being a communication tool between the viewer and the artist, as well as between the viewer and topics that the artist is talking about. And I find it fascinating when I can find an art piece like yours that physically puts me into the piece.
And I think it's successful with this work too, because I don't want to I'm definitely not trying to like pass blame or anything on anyone. Like, I mean, even things like climate change and the, you know, kind of the ways of that we're developing infrastructure, and that the ways we're like harvesting resources, like none of us develop these systems. None of us design these systems. We're just like, that's just the world we're born into, and that's what the options that's available for us. And so it's like, I don't want to be like making works that are feel like they're accusatory or like casting blame, but at the same time we do have a relationship, whether or not we're engaged with it, with the ecosystems around us.
There's a lot of aesthetic within the piece, and and also a lot of fact. So can you talk about that interplay between that aesthetic and the fact that you see within the piece?
Yeah, so this is kind of where things get really complicated and tricky between working with like scientific data, working with you know, like issues around like environmental issues, scientific concerns, and working with art. I really don't want to be bound by like having to, like, I'm not going to ever claim to be a scientist, and I am not like, I don't know exactly what this data means. And as an artist, I feel like, you know, it's important to be able to play with data and to be able to just like experiment and explore. But at the same time, I do feel a responsibility to not be directly misleading. And so that's where having feedback from scientists, or having a background in like ecology helps to like to get the right idea across. And again, I'm interested in just trying to get the basic to express the basic relationships of our interactions with nature. Really interested with looking at data visualization, is like some of the data sources are just totally wrong. Like some of the data from NASA satellites that show where fires are burning on some days, there's like massive gaps where the data, where there's an aerial flyover of an area to show how much is burned. Satellite data is just totally missing information, because there's only so many satellites. They can't see through super dense smoke. And so like, just because data is on a screen doesn't mean it's true. And just because they download data from the government database, that doesn't mean that that's actually what's there in reality.
So I'm always curious, and I ask this with a lot of the people that I talk to. When you were creating this work, was there anything that challenged what you already knew as an artist? And this could be either technical or theoretical. And how did you work with it?
Yeah, so while I've been making this work, I one of the things that was challenging for me is actually seeing this discrepancy between like satellite data of wildfires and the data that the BC government had for these fires, and just seeing the
Mm-hmm.
inconsistencies and holes. And as an artist, then it's like, how do I fill that then? And that's, a thing I want to keep working on, is like using more of my artistic hand to then kind of paint and fill in those gaps
Mm-hmm.
based on the landscape, based on like previous weather patterns, but also just kind of based on my intuition of knowing how fire spreads. But that's a thing that I was confronted with this program, that was like a challenge. And again, just highlighting how like just because it's an image from a satellite doesn't mean it's the full picture. And I think just like working with multidisciplinary interests, it allows you to just like actually like, I feel like as cheesy as it sounds, it allows you to just like be much more of your authentic self. Like we all have various realms we're interested in, and just being able to like work between these day to day, week to week, whatever it is, or if you have a project where you get to simultaneously be working with math and art in a like new way, it allows for like new ways of working. It allows for new ideas to emerge, and it also allows for much more rich space for collaboration.
Mm-hmm.
Because I feel if you're an individual who can connect these different ways of understanding in these different fields, you can bring people who are mathematicians and artists into a room together and have conversations together, and
Mm-hmm.
like help connect, and like, beyond an individual level, like that is helping to connect a more like collaborative, understanding between these things.
Mm-hmm.
And I think like, again, it's like the kind of problems we face in our future are so incredibly complex, and we need everybody, or we need people in every single different field working with these problems in mind. But like I keep hearing again and again, and I really feel for myself too, that like we really need people that are connecting between these fields also. Like working within the University of Victoria, there's always a sentiment of interest in working more interdisciplinary, but there's like these institutional barriers that keep everybody siloed in different departments. And almost like, and sometimes it's like competition for resources, or just like lack of capacity and time. But there's so much interest for more cross-disciplinary approaches.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that interest is extending like into other realms in our society as well. And I feel like it's only going to increase. So it's like a time where there might not be that many opportunities to directly tie those things together now, but it's like if you're like just really trusting that is going to be more of a thing in the future, and
Absolutely.
there's going to be more opportunities for that all the time. And even within art, there's more and more practices, residencies,
Mm-hmm.
interest in this kind of cross-disciplinary practices too. Yeah, and again, that's one thing that really excites me about the idea of having like a maker space directly
Mm-hmm.
integrated into an art space. Because I
Yeah.
know with the maker communities, there's definitely a lot of people who are like approaching it from a much more like technical perspective. The people
Mm-hmm.
who like maintain the machines and do the programming and
Yeah.
help with that kind of stuff. I think it's like really healthy for like artists who maybe don't have that technical knowledge to come in contact with those people, and vice
Yeah.
versa. And like that can, like, collaborations can arise from that, or just each person can have new inspiration from those conversations.
So, what advice would you give someone interested in pursuing a digital media career or even as an art practice?
I feel like one of the big things to do is just to try to work on like learning how to learn new programs and learning how to learn new technology.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Basically, you can learn anything, and you can like create anything with the tools that are available. Like it is a really amazing time to be a content creator with digital technology, whether it's music, whether it's art, whether it's movies. The technology is like so much cheaper. The programs are so accessible. There's like free open source versions of any kind of application basically.
Hmm.
And there's so much like online tutorials and everything. But like getting past this initial like learning curve of like, yeah, it can be like a bit daunting at first, but starting with learning a simple process or learning even just one computer program will help you learn new processes and new programs in the future. And this kind of information is like, or that kind of knowledge is cumulative. But it's really, really empowering. And if this is something that interests you, definitely feel like trust it and go with that intuition and just try to break things down into smaller projects to start with, because those building blocks will help you like build up a set of tools in the future.
I really want to thank you for for sitting with me and talking with me and going through this journey. Is there anything else you'd like to add before we say goodbye?
Yeah, I guess there's one thing that kind of tying in a lot of these different conversations, just something I think like our whole society and our whole culture really needs to figure out is like we've separated everything. We've separated ourselves from nature. We view ourselves different from nature. We view this discipline different than that discipline. And like in some contexts, that's like okay. And that's kind of like necessary for our understanding and to like move forward. But like the thing we're really missing is like wrapping it all together again and like creating spaces where there's connections between these. Even I just love like talking to people about their dreams and stuff too, just to kind of like illuminate like for my own self, like, wow, you think in completely different ways. Your mind works totally different than mine. But also it's like you're making this stuff up. This is like your mind putting these pieces together. And
Yeah,
like, yeah,
yeah.
I don't know.
No, it's true. It's very true. It's the one thing I learned as I've been growing up, how different we all think. And
Hmm.
that's okay.